Hello, my name is Stephen Smith, CPA. I am a Quicken and QuickBooks expert. And in this video, we're going to go over troubleshooting issues associated with Quicken data file corruption. What happens when your Quicken file does not validate? Let's go into the Quicken file. This is a sample Quicken client file that would not validate. What does that mean? File, validate and repair, validate file, okay. And it would go through all the steps, but it would freeze up. Now, what is validate? Validating is essentially database hygiene. It goes through, it checks debits and credits and reconciliations and all of the various databases that make up your Quicken file to make sure it's all working, everything foots and is proper. And time after time, it would get to this step, checking stock splits and freeze. It would not proceed. It would not go any further. In fact, it would lock up Quicken. And then we'd have to come into the task manager and come down to the program in task manager and force an end to the program because it just wouldn't move beyond that step. And we tried this several times. So let's start. What can we do? How can we resolve? Well, the first thing you always want to do is make a backup. So whenever you're dealing with a file, make a backup, select make a backup, next, save it to where you want to have it saved into a special place. That way, if while you're messing with it, you break something, you can always revert and try again. So remember, always back up. The next step we did is make sure we were on the most recent version. Quicken is now a subscription. So we go into check for updates. You have already the latest version of Quicken, release 64.25. So that's not the issue. The third thing we did is accept all of the transactions. So every once in a while, unaccepted transactions will kind of mess things up. So I like to go in and accept them all. Now in this instance, I'm accepting them all. Now normally I would come in and I would go in individually and categorize every single transaction. But for this demonstration purposes, we're just accepting them all. Okay, once we've cleared all of the flags and we've accepted all of the transaction, let's try to validate it. If it doesn't validate, let's try what's called a super validate. Now the way you get to super validate is the same way you would as validate, which is file, but before clicking on the validate and repair, hold down the Control Shift key. So Control Shift, select the validate, and now we see something called super validate file. What is a super validate? Well, it's just a validate, but it's on steroids. It's a super validate. So it's a little bit deeper. It's a little bit more complex. It's a little bit more involved. However, in this instance, even after updating and accepting all of the transactions and, of course, making the backup, it's still not getting past the checking stock splits section, which is frustrating. So again, we have to come into Task Manager to end this file because it's completely locked up. And now we're going to move on to a slightly deeper step, which is to make a full copy of the file. So we're going to go to File, Copy Backup, and there's a couple of different options here. We can make a backup, which is what we've already done. We're going to create a copy or a template. So we're going to do this. We're going to make sure all of the dates are selected, and we're going to include everything in the copy. This will essentially rebuild the database and also disconnect it from some of the online services. So be aware, if this does work, you'll have to go back and reconnect some of the online services. However, in this instance, our validate still did not work. We still got to the checking stock splits, and it still would not validate completely. Again, into the task manager to close the program and then reopen the program. So then we started looking at the securities. So if we go into Tools, Security List, we'll see all of the securities in this file. I put them in order because I don't think the bonds are the issue, because the bonds don't have stock splits, and there's not that many stocks. In fact, very few in this sample file. By clicking on each one, I look to see if there were any placeholder entries. Frequently, placeholder entries will cause a Quicken file to be a little amiss. In this instance, there were no Quicken placeholder entries. If there were placeholder entries, I would replace them with adds, such as this, or buys. But we want to make sure that there are no placeholder entries. I also unselected split adjust. Not sure if that did anything, but I unselected it for this particular security because I wasn't sure if that was it. After going through all the securities, I tried another validate and that did not work. So I went back into our validate and looked at some of these other options. And specifically, I went to correct investing price history and I did a repair. So let's try doing that. And what happens is it went through, it corrected it, and it gave us a very good sign. It came up with a validation for QDF, QEL, and these are all the various components of a Quicken database. And it repaired a few price histories, which was a very good sign. So at this point, we were kind of optimistic that it was going to work. We went back into our validate. And when we validated, it went through. It did flag one security as being a little suspect, and I went in, I checked out that security, and it looked okay. But it passed. Now I took this, made a backup with the new validated file, reinstalled it as my primary Quicken file for this client, and continued to work in this file as if nothing happened. And hopefully that cured it. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I can be reached at www.quickencoach.com or www.sundialvfo.com. Thank you.